Chapter 13, The Dream, Part 2. Wow, Flint said. That is something. A shrill scream pierced the quiet of the labyrinth, carried by a hot gust of wind with the stench of blood that rushed past from behind them. Twilight's eyes widened as she looked back.
That thing followed us in here?
What thing? Flint asked.
Flint!
Twilight yelled, eyes roaming over the paths around her.
Help me find Polaris!
Don't you start yelling at me now, Flint shouted. What thing followed us? And who the hell is Polaris?
No time!
Twilight shot back. She grunted as she leapt up at a path of stars above them. Gravity shifted around her as she drew close, allowing her to stand on its surface upside down.
Polaris, it's the North Star! Didn't you ever pay attention in astronomy class?
Astronomy class? Flint echoed incredulously below, or was it above her? I was raised in a barren land! The stars began to pulse an ugly red as the monster flew into the chamber, blood wings spread wide. Flint cursed, already turning the barrel of his repeater onto its path. Hot lead pinged off the star paths as the monster ducked and weaved around them.
Aha!
Twilight grinned as she jumped from the path she was on to one running in a gentle curve along the wall.
Flint, I found Camelopardus!
Why won't this damn thing die? Flint roared. He grunted as the monster slammed into him. The rope between them snapped, and he spiraled off the stairs he stood on to land on the lower path with a thud. At least slow down, he coughed. It only took Twilight a couple more seconds to locate the North Star. Heart pounding, she poked her head over the edge of her path to see Flint wrestling with the monster below. She gasped, horn glowing. Flint appeared, still yelling, at her side in a flash of purple light. Warm blood soaked into the fur on his chest.
Come on,
Twilight said, tugging the confused stallion behind her.
I think I found the way out.
How is that thing still alive? Flint asked. How am I still alive?
Don't worry about it.
Twilight yelled as they galloped through a corkscrew-twisting hallway of stars and obsidian. The monster's screeches echoed behind them.
I'll explain once we're safe. If we make it out of here.
Twilight had gotten this far before.
If to be true, thee seeketh the exit to mine own labyrinth, Twilight Sparkle, the lodestar shall mark thy path.
That was the hint Luna would always give her, only to laugh at her futile efforts as she made the stars dance across the paths. Twilight could never find the way through with the princess interfering, and was still apprehensive that the stars would begin to run away from her any coming second.
Why are they staying so static?
She glanced behind her, catching no sight of the monster. For the first time, it occurred to her that maybe the reason Luna wasn't interfering was because Luna wasn't even here. Maybe all that remained was an empty body, devoid of soul or thought to garrison its defenses. Maybe she'd been corrupted into some animal that no longer cared for such things. Or maybe she wasn't interfering because she actually wanted Twilight to pierce her barriers. The screech pierced the air, louder than ever before. Twilight looked back just in time to see the monster burst out of the wall with the sound of shattering glass. It raced towards them on all fours, wings cramped against its shoulders in the tight confines of the hall. Fuck! Flint shouted. It's got us! Twilight's heart soared as she rounded the next corner.
Here! We're almost there!
A door of smooth obsidian waited just a few seconds away, its surface decorated with softly glowing runes. She ripped the door open with her telekinesis, revealing a clear night sky.
Don't slow down!
She called.
We should be safe once we're through!
You ain't gotta tell me twice! Flint shot back. She threw herself over the threshold, and immediately felt the nauseating sensation of unexpected displacement. Reality twisted around her, the stars taking the shapes of a peaceful landscape. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a brilliant pale light over the world, framed by the watchful bulk of distant mountains. Mushrooms of every size, some as small as her hoof, some larger than a home, outlined rolling green hills with the gentle glow of their caps. Twilight and Flint were standing on the edge of a deep depression between the hills, looking out over a lake with a surface as calm as glass. A small, curving island coated in hanging mosses was the only thing to disturb the lake, spotlighted by the giant, glowing pink leaves of the single tree that grew on it. And curled up beneath the petals of a single protective flower, on a plain wooden bed, slept Princess Luna. Twilight's jaw dropped. She took a tentative step forwards, a strangled "Princess?" escaping her throat. Flint stepped in front of her. "Focus, little mare. That thing might still be on us," he said, scanning the horizon.
"This is Princess Luna's personal sanctum,"
Twilight said. She blinked as she realized the rope that had been tethering her to Flint was missing.
"I think if it could get in here, it already would have."
"Well," Flint frowned, his shoulders relaxing ever so slightly. "I guess you'd know better than me." Twilight nodded, an eager grin plastered across her face.
"Let's see if we can go talk to the princess."
Before Flint could respond, he was interrupted by a shrill, tearing sound unlike anything Twilight had heard before. It seemed to originate right between her ears, like some manic god ripping 1,000 books in half within her skull. She cried out, clutching her ears and curling up on the ground in a vain attempt to keep the offending sound out, to no avail. It passed in an instant, leaving Twilight lying dazed in the grass. When she regained her senses, she became aware of a sickly red light to her left, and turned to find the source. A gasp escaped her lips as she saw the blood-red moon hovering over the horizon, opposite from the pale moon which still shone like a small sun to her right. "Or maybe you don't," Flint growled. He crouched down, kicking at a lever on his battle armor. Steam hissed from the shoulder as his repeater reloaded before angling back into place. "You got a plan? Or do you just want me to shoot till you poof me again?" Twilight didn't answer. She had gone pale as she recognized the equine shape flying towards them, silhouetted by the blood moon's light. It was the monster. Of course it had followed them. It couldn't get through Luna's barriers, but Twilight had led it straight to her doorstep.
"I let some beast into Princess Luna's safe haven! Stupid, Twilight! Stupid, stupid, stupid!"
The monster hurtled towards them, blood wings spread wide. The plants died in its wake, the clear night sky succumbing to angry black clouds.
"We have to get to the princess!"
Twilight yelled, horn glowing.
"Get ready for a fight!"
"I'm always ready for a fight," Flint growled. In a spark of purple, Twilight teleported them both onto the island. Or she tried to. She felt a powerful resistance at the last moment, too strong to overcome and too late to stop herself. The two ponies reappeared along the edges of the lake, splashing down into the shallow water running between the mushroom towers. "The fuck?" Flint shouted. "This where you meant to put us?"
"No!"
Twilight shot back. She leapt into the water without hesitation, pushing herself towards the island with hooves and horn alike. The surface of the water remained eerily still even as she swam through it.
"We have to swim!"
"Twilight," Flint said, "you're not moving."
"What?"
Twilight looked back. Despair swelled in her breast as she realized that she hadn't gotten any further from the shore. The dream's reality was warping around her, keeping her from getting any closer to the sleeping princess.
"No, no, no, no! Luna, wake up! You're in danger!"
The monster was just seconds away now. Through her teary-eyed panic, Twilight could see its hungry gaze locked on Luna's slumbering form. Its tongue flicked out and licked at its lips, leaving a trail of blood. There was a sudden distortion directly above Luna. Where once there was just a starry sky, there was now something more. Twilight's eyes were drawn to the object, and it took her a few seconds to realize that it was as if a section of the sky had suddenly begun to move. The piece of living sky flew lower to the ground, taking on recognizable form as the mountains in the background provided contrast. It was an equine shape, tall and elegant as Luna, its entire body reflecting the night sky so perfectly that it was impossible to pick out where it started or ended against the backdrop of the stars. It came to a stop high above Luna's island, facing down the monster with an impassive, featureless stare. Twilight held her breath as she watched the monster pull up short. It hissed at the new challenger, spraying bloody spittle down onto the still waters below. The defender's horn lit up, the night sky seeming to twist around its tip. A lance of twinkling nighttime shot out of its horn, aimed for the monster's heart. The monster raised a shield of blood, deflecting the magical attack. Twilight watched with wide eyes as the two dream creatures clashed, bending the dream's reality around them. The monster flew furiously around its opponent, darting in to land vicious strikes with its limbs, while the defender kept at a distance, opting for lances of energy. Wherever they went, the dream's peaceful landscape was distorted. Plants died, grew huge, or simply walked away. The night sky twisted into colors both obscene and wonderful. The mountains looped back onto themselves and took flight. The only constant was the small lake and the island at its center, a cradle of stability with Princess Luna nestled inside.
We need to get out of here,
Twilight said. She turned to where Luna slept, heart yearning to be able to reach her.
It isn't safe. We'll come back for her.
Yeah, just hurry it up, Flint said. Twilight closed her eyes, extending her senses into the dream. It was a wild place, the fabric all at once endlessly changing yet totally still. She could feel the oppressive will that had been trapping her in this place lightening, directing its focus elsewhere. The two dream creatures were seemingly evenly matched, locked in stalemate.
Perhaps the monster doesn't have the energy to spare keeping us asleep anymore? I'm waking you up first,
Twilight said.
We shouldn't have lost much time in the waking world. Raise Saber on the radio and keep her from using any explosives. Princess Luna herself must be nearby and we can't risk hurting her.
Right, Flint said. I can do that. Her horn sparkled. When Twilight opened her eyes, Flint was nowhere to be seen. With a flourish of her horn, she found the hole she had punched in Luna's barriers and sealed it once more. She sighed, her gaze lingering over Luna's slumbering form. She didn't want to leave her here with those two creatures fighting over her resting place, but she couldn't leave them free to roam either.
I've got you, Princess,
she whispered.
I'll save you.
Twilight's eyes fluttered open. She was lying on her side. The gentle rumble of the ocean filled the confines of her helmet. The beam of her helmet-borne flashlight wavered before her, reflecting the swirling paths of dust drifting down to the floor. Some strange aspect of exhaustion had settled over her. She felt as if she had ran 100 kilometers without rest and then slept uninterrupted for a day. The comfortable ache of exercise filled her limbs, and yet they moved with no complaint when she picked herself up from the floor. Her mind was quick and clear, her heart beating a slow, steady rhythm. She took a deep breath and experienced a deep, relaxed ease that she had forgotten was even possible. She became aware of a voice crackling over the radio. It took her a moment to recognize it as Sea Saber.
We're sending out the torpedo,
the mayor was saying.
If you can hear me, stay away from the blast zone. Trails, get ready to...
Flint's voice cut her off with a burst of static.
Wait, boss. We're all right.
Is Twilight there?
Rainbow's voice asked.
Twilight, can you hear me?
It was at that point that Twilight realized some response was expected of her. She adjusted her position, thinking of how comfortable her armor was feeling just then.
I'm fine, Rainbow. Don't worry about me.
A clamor of voices came over the radio. Saber's stern voice was the only one to come out clear to Twilight's ears.
What happened?
Dream creature. Maybe even two of them.
Twilight said. She yawned, sitting up off the ground.
They induced us to sleep, and then trapped us in nightmares. I don't think they're a threat anymore.
She looked up thoughtfully.
Oh, also, we saw Princess Luna.
What?
Rainbow asked.
The princess is down there? I'm going down there. Shy, give me your helmet. Princess Luna?
Star Trails asked, her voice laced with awe.
Is she alive?
We didn't actually see her body.
Twilight added.
Just her dream self.
So what are you telling me?
Saber asked tersely.
Just give us some time,
Twilight said.
I don't want to risk a torpedo hurting her, and we should be safe now. Let us look around.
Fluttershy's soft voice was barely audible.
Be careful, Twilight. Head on a swivel, Flint,
Saber said.
I want to know exactly what's going on in there. Got it, boss.
It was easy to find Flint in the darkness. The burly stallion was standing just a couple meters to her right, peering at the dark shapes all around them. Twilight stood up, stretching the stiffness out of her legs. She narrowed her eyes as she turned in a slow circle, lips curving into a thoughtful frown. The flashlight had given her glimpses of her surroundings, but she needed a more complete picture. She tapped her magic and was surprised to find her arcane reserves completely replenished.
Interesting.
With a thought, she summoned an orb of purple light, pushed a surge of magic into it, and settled it in place far above her.
Hell,
Flint said. Twilight's frown twisted into a grimace at the macabre sight before her. The flashlight had previously outlined many small rounded shapes that she had taken for piles of weathered rock or the rubble of remains of statues. The glow of the orb above cast the shapes into much more vivid detail. The first description that came to Twilight's mind was a mass grave. It was true that there was plenty of rubble. Indeed, nearly half of the columns which had originally held up the roof were now gone. Sections of wall had entirely collapsed, and the few remaining tapestries were worn beyond any semblance of recognition. Beyond the crumbled remains of the architecture, however, was a scattered collection of dozens of pony bodies. They covered the floor with their bulk. Some curled up alone, others huddled into small groups, as many as 3 or 4. In some places, Twilight would already be able to walk without tripping over bodies, but even at their thinnest, she could only take a few good steps between each one. She walked among them, peering down at the corpses with idle curiosity. Most were long-dead skeletons, their waterlogged bones and scraps of tattered clothing all that remained. Many she recognized as more animal than pony, sporting the mutated tails of sea ponies or entirely different body shapes. She paused at these corpses longer than others, examining their unusual skeletal structure and idly wishing for some kind of waterproof notepad. She recognized families huddling together in their final moments and royal guards curled around their spears. A few of the bodies were more recent, completely encased behind variations of the steam-powered clockwork armor that she herself wore. Despite the variety, there was one aspect they all shared. There were barely any signs of trauma. She didn't have much of a medical background, but to Twilight, it seemed as if all these ponies had merely laid down and died.
this is creepy as fuck,
Flint said, passing by her.
The whole place is filled with bodies, boss. It's the cleanest damn grave I've ever seen. Like they all just fell asleep.
It must be those dream creatures,
Twilight said, looking closer at the shriveled corpse of a royal guard.
They're inducing a coma in anything that wanders in, and then feed on their dreams until they die. I wonder if there's any side effects.
She thought as she calmly examined old wounds marked in the guard's bones.
Poor bastards.
Flint grumbled.
Are they still there?
Trails asked.
Am I gonna find myself having a nightmare about Flint's cooking or something?
Twilight shook her head, ignoring Flint's grumbled response.
They're both fighting each other in Princess Luna's mind. I don't think either is strong enough to defeat the other, but if they do, well, I doubt either will be able to escape the mind of the legendary Lady of the Night. But what if they hurt Luna?
Fluttershy asked.
I hope she's not in any danger. She shouldn't be,
Twilight answered, inspecting a sea pony body. Her eyes widened as she noticed a very slight rise and fall to its chest.
Is it still alive? Luna's defenses are formidable, and I already have plans to study her condition once we get her somewhere safe.
Twilight,
Flint said.
is this your princess?
Twilight turned, quickly finding where Flint stood on a raised dais at the very center of the chamber. She activated the air jets on her armor, closing the distance with 2 quick jumps. She climbed the steps to the dais with bated breath, coming up to Flint's side. Atop the dais was a frame of chipped obsidian carved into a gently curving waning moon. Star-shaped lapis lazuli adorned the frame's outer surface, placed in patterns reflecting constellations Twilight recognized as Luna's favorite works. Nestled inside the moon, atop a faded cushion long devoid of its stuffing, submerged at the bottom of a drowned world, slept Princess Luna.
Princess!
Twilight rushed towards the comatose Alicord, tears building in her eyes. She collapsed at the princess's side with a hoof outstretched, uncertain as to whether it would be wise to touch her. She seemed so peaceful, her side rising and falling at a glacial pace. She was adorned in the same pale blue armor once worn by Nightmare Moon, but otherwise showed no signs of injury, whether from past wounds or the pressure of the ocean above. A chill ran down Twilight's spine as she spotted the trail of red tears running down Luna's cheeks.
I'm guessing that's her then,
Flint said. His voice was uncharacteristically quiet.
Huh.
Rainbow's voice was clear over the radio.
You found the princess? We found her, Rainbow,
Twilight said. Tears fogged her vision as she fell over the slumbering Alicord, hugging her tightly with armored hooves.
We found her!
Gava clicked her beak in irritation.
I swear to fuck, if she breaks out again, I'm personally eating all of you.
Stronger than any pony there is, Top Gallant mused by her side. Told ya. One of the stallions inside the cell in front of them yelped as he was thrown into the bars with a painful crack. Gava sighed. The pair stood in the brig of her ship, watching a half-dozen hirelings struggle to subdue a single orange earthmare. Sea Saber's ship, the Argo, Gava thought it was called, could be seen out the nearest window bobbing gently in the waves.
Get off of me, you no-good varmints!
The prisoner inside the cell seethed. She kicked and bucked furiously, fending off the small squad of Gava's hirelings. It was a valiant effort, but they managed to pin her beneath them with only one more groaning casualty.
There'll be a reckoning for y'all. Just you wait till I get out of these chains and introduce y'all to Bucks McGillicuddy and Kicks McGee.
What? Top Gallant chuckled. What the hell?
3 chains this time,
Gava commanded.
But ma'am,
A panting mare putting all her weight on one of the prisoner's forelegs said.
She only broke out of a single chain. Surely just 2 would do? What are you, my fucking quartermaster?
Gava snapped.
3 chains! Yes, ma'am.
The prisoner grunted as she tried to break free once more, but to no avail. After far too long spent running the chains around her limbs and securing them to each other, the battered hirelings took their injured in tow and left to nurse their wounds. The prisoner glared up at Gava with hard green eyes.
What are y'all even doing this for, huh? What did I ever do to you?
Top Gallant shrugged. Well, you existed, so there's that.
We're not explaining ourselves to you,
Gava said as she entered the cell.
If you break out again, I'm sticking you in a barrel and wrapping it in chains.
Guess y'all are too much of a coward to get close when I ain't trussed up like a hay bale before a hurricane, huh?
The prisoner snarked. What? Top Gallant snickered back in the hall. How do you come up with that? Gava rolled her eyes as she grabbed the prisoner by the chain wrapped around her neck.
Look, I could kill you with both claws tied behind my back, but I want you alive. Come along now.
She tugged at the chain, clacking her beak again as the prisoner dug her hooves into the floor.
I ain't budging.
Fine then,
Gava growled.
We'll do it the hard way. So, this is her?
Trails asked.
This is her,
Twilight said. She was seated on the floor in the back of the submarine, relishing the feel of the air against her bare coat. Fluttershy was sitting in the corner to her left, and Rainbow to her right. Trails stood across from her, looking down open-mouthed at where Princess Luna slept between the four of them.
I didn't really think she was real. Seriously?
Rainbow asked, gesturing with a huff.
She's a princess! How can you even not believe in a princess? Rainbow,
Fluttershy admonished softly.
Manners. It's different for them, Rainbow,
Twilight said, horn gently glowing as she cast some simple diagnostic spells.
The princesses haven't been around to help ponies for centuries.
Trail shrugged.
Of course, the spiritual types are always talking about the princesses watching over us, going to church. Some of them burn sacrifices or throw them into the ocean. I haven't put much stock into that. None of us do.
Twilight thought back to Flint's dream. He had been defending a church, one clearly devoted to Luna, now that she thought of it. How much of that dream had been based on a real memory? Had the monster created a nightmare, or had it just exploited a dark memory of Flint losing over a dozen friends in a place supposedly under Luna's watch?
I guess it would be kind of hard for you guys, wouldn't it?
Rainbow asked.
Coming down here all the time and seeing all the... well, everything Equestria's lost. That's definitely part of it,
Trails admitted.
And I guess I've never been the sort of mare to take something like that at some pony's word.
Flint poked his head into view, clearing his throat. We're just a few minutes out from the ship. Trails nodded, keeping her gaze fixed on the sleeping princess.
We'll be ready.
5 minutes later, Twilight was crossing the sub's port side ramp. Luna carefully levitated in front of her. The wind of the Argo's engines pulled at her mane, though she noted Luna's mane was still floating as if in a gentle autumn breeze. Sea Saber was waiting by the hatch when she boarded.
We need to stop off for repairs and resupply.
That's fine with me,
Twilight said, stepping aside so her friends could board.
I want some time to study her condition anyways. If I can just get her to wake up...
We still need to be careful of Gava,
Saber said.
And any other bounty hunters for that matter. We'll only become an even bigger target if word gets out about what we found.
Well, speak of the devil.
Twilight didn't recognize the voice that spoke behind her, but the alarm in Saber's eyes was more than enough to make her heart skip a beat. She snapped her head around, quickly spotting the griffin leaning against the bulkhead at the end of the hall.
Gava!
Saber barked, confirming Twilight's fears.
Get back, Twilight!
Twilight took a step behind the Pegasus, keeping Luna close at her side. At the same time, Fluttershy and Rainbow stepped off the sub.
Oh, is that an alicorn?
Gava called. She was smiling, her tone conversational.
You're really making a name for yourself in the new business, Saber. Hey there, Dye Job. You!
Rainbow snarled, causing Fluttershy to squeak in alarm. She lowered herself to the ground, wings flaring.
You looking for another thrashing? I wouldn't call our last meeting a thrashing.
Gava said.
At least, not for me.
Trails, Flint,
Saber said, speaking into her earpiece.
Gava is on board the ship. Drop what you're doing and get up here.
Hey, I'm not looking for a fight.
Gava said. She held a talon up to her eyes, making a show of inspecting it.
Just give me the gifted, and I'll be out of your tail. Shut it, chump!
Rainbow snapped.
We're not going anywhere with you. Give me a reason not to knock your beak in.
Fluttershy was huddled behind a bulkhead, shivering. Twilight set Luna down behind one as well, her mind reviewing her sparse selection of combat spells. Sea Saber said nothing. She kept her gaze fixed on Gava, her hooves spread apart.
Yep, that's about what I expected.
Gava said.
Top!
The door behind her opened with a hiss of steam. Twilight gasped.
Applejack!
Applejack growled at the blue-coated stallion that pushed her into Gava's waiting arm. Her legs were restrained by 3 layers of padlocked chains from top to bottom, and a rag was taped over her mouth as a gag. She looked bruised and dirty, her hat nowhere to be seen, but her eyes were filled with determination. A trio of ponies in mismatched armor stood in the doorway, bearing guns, clubs, and heavy shoes. Gava grabbed Applejack in one hand, holding the mare in front of her. With her other hand, she raised a single sharp talon up to her prisoner's neck.
Surrender, or your friend dies.
You wouldn't,
Saber said.
She's worth too much to you.
Do the math, Saber. One of these gifted for at least 3 more? And a fucking alicorn?
Gava chuckled.
I can only spend so much money. Fuck, I'd even kill 2 of them.
Rainbow scratched a hoof against the floor. Her nostrils flared as she stared daggers at the griffin.
If you hurt a single hair on her head, it's probably too late for that, to be honest.
Gava said.
Let me tell ya, this cow pony is not easy to wrangle.
Twilight grimaced as she saw Rainbow's body tense. She took a ginger step forwards, whispering,
Rainbow, please, don't do anything brash.
Rainbow didn't even look back.
She's got AJ. She hurt her. Nobody does that to my friends.
She hissed.
She'll kill her.
Twilight shot back. Rainbow scoffed.
Please, Twilight. I'm the fastest Pegasus in Equestria. I'm not gonna let some bird brain hurt my friend. By the way,
Gava added,
I'm not gonna sit around all day and let your 2 squatties arm up. So, if I don't get an answer soon, then I'm assuming it's a no. Rainbow,
Twilight hissed.
please, just...
She flinched as the blast of wind from Rainbow's wing smacked into her face. And as several things happened all at once.